This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to welcome you on this June 28th edition to Real Talk. It's Jesperson and Hicks. This is going to be a fast-moving show. Love it. 3 guests lined up in just a second. The mayor of Leduc, Alberta, Bob Young, on an absolutely bonkers development at a city council meeting just a couple of days ago. You've probably, regardless of where you're tuning in from across the country or beyond, heard about this. A woman stands up at the council meeting, a member of the public, to the microphone, part of that process, right, where members of the public can have their voices heard in front of their elected officials. Well, she goes off the rails, talking about the Progress Pride flag, about what the colors stand for, talking about bestiality and necrophilia, and I mean, just absolutely insane ramblings. The mayor ends up shutting down the council meeting in an unprecedented move. He's going to talk to us exactly why he did that and how he's processing what went down. We're going to reconnect today with Jeff Nash. Remember Nasher, the founder of Rinks Around the League? He's worked in the National Hockey League for a long time, and well, he's got an opinion like thousands of other hockey fans do about the NHL shutting down themed jerseys. The National Hockey League, per Commissioner Gary Bettman, says they will no longer be participating as a league in themed fundraising or awareness-raising nights for pride, cancer, military, you name it. The NHL says, we're out. Don't go into the corners, I guess, is the message from the National Hockey League Commissioner. We'll find out what Nasher thinks about that. And then Alberta's Assistant Auditor General, Eric Leonty, is going to join us. We've been covering this story on Alberta's orphan wells for quite some time. Massive environmental and fiscal liabilities. And it's coming down to taxpayers, to citizens. If you live in Alberta, you're one of those getting burned by the lack of accountability in the oil and gas industry. Of course, thousands and thousands of these wells being orphaned, being left, being passed off to smaller companies that then go bankrupt. It's a grift. Everybody knows it. The Auditor General released a report back in March, and we're going to get into that with the Assistant AG. All of that coming up in just a second. But I also want to talk to you about housing prices real quick. You've, of course, been paying attention. You've seen that they're going up. You know, they're on the rise again, including right here in Alberta. And you know who's really riding that wave all the way to the bank? It's real estate agents. Really, there's no better time to become a real estate agent in Alberta, and there's no better place to do it than Rello. Rello is an online real estate school that gives you so much more than a traditional course. They're going to help you pass your exams with confidence. Just check out their amazingly high pass rates on their website. But they'll also give you access to expert instructors, free webinars, and, this is great, membership in a thriving community of real estate professionals who can help you get a head start on your real estate career. You can get the ball rolling today by signing up right now at Rello.ca. That's RELO.ca. Real Talkers, I want you to know that we've thought about this, whether or not we're going to play this video, and I do so with mixed feelings. On one hand, we're amplifying a message that, quite frankly, is disgusting. It's deplorable. On the other hand, we're all adults here, right? And we need to know what we're talking about. If you didn't see what went down at the council meeting in Leduc, Alberta on Monday, I want you to be informed. So, as best you can, try to keep your focus on, the fact that we're going to take this conversation in a positive direction while we set the scene with this, an excerpt of a speech, a rant, you might call it, delivered by a woman who identified herself as Laurel in front of councillors and Leduc's mayor on Monday night.
The thing is, we've come so far into think that being inclusive of everyone is a God-given right. Now, I'm going to show you guys something here real quickly. The original Pride flag, had red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. What they added to it was this: a black, blue, I'm going to say this again, a black, brown, light blue, light pink, and white. I'm going to tell you the secret hidden agenda of this because there's lots. Do you guys know what that means? Yeah, good question. Someone please answer that, since you guys all promoted it.
We're not allowed to, in public commentary, to have a back and forth discussion. You can
Okay,
make
no
your
problem.
presentation.
Let me explain. Let me explain to everyone who doesn't know, including you guys. You may not know. Okay? The black stands for necrophilia. Do you guys know what that is? That's sex with the dead.
That's right, Ryan.
The brown stands for bestiality. Bestiality. Do you know what that is?
Your
That's
worship,
sex with animals.
I call for a point of privilege.
The blue stands for pedophilia with baby boys.
Okay, I've made
The
a privilege
pink
motion.
stands
The
for
speaker's supposed to
pedophilia
stop speaking.
with baby girls.
Call for
The
it.
white stands for
So at this point, he cuts off her mic.
So they cut off the mic, and then as the video goes on, you'll find that she starts to get applause.
No, yeah, we're going too far.
Now, Johnny, when I first watched this,
Excuse me.
And
Okay.
then he calls a recess.
We'll take
So,
a recess right now.
that was Leduc's Mayor Bob Young that you hear say going too far. It was Leduc Councillor Ryan Pollard that you heard there calling for a point of order at several times. That's basically, following the rules of how meetings go. He's basically, that's like an objection. He's saying, hang on a second. So at first I wanted to believe that the clapping was people clapping that the mic was cut.
Me too, yeah.
But I'm not so sure that that's the case. Now, Councillor Pollard posted right after this happened, and I'm going to read a portion of it. Public commentary is a feature of our meetings at Leduc City Council, meant to give citizens an opportunity to bring concerns to their elected representatives in a public forum. It's something I believe strongly in. He goes on and says, this first speaker, this is on Monday, quickly deviated wildly from the topic that originally he indicated. There was a gentleman by the name of Bill McDavid, identified himself as one of the Freedom Convoy, and then this gal Laurel was with them. Said he's the less about the content, the better, but we were treated in part to a brief lesson on chemtrails, ultimately a disgusting, profanity-laced tirade in relation to the city's Pride initiatives. I should also note that the RCMP in Leduc right now are investigating vandalism of a Pride crosswalk. We're grateful that the mayor of Leduc, His Worship Bob Young, has agreed to join us this morning on the show. Mayor, thanks for making time for us. I know this isn't the type of stuff that you want Leduc recognized for, because there's a lot of great stuff happening in Leduc, but how are you wrapping your mind around Monday night?
Ryan, it's extremely sad that we had to come to that point. I understand that people don't support Pride. I get that, but for some reason they think that we're infringing on their rights by having a Pride flag flying, by doing a crosswalk, by wrapping a bus that says a seat for everyone. It's sad to me that we have people that just hate, everyone.
Mayor, you ended up shutting that meeting down. You've been in politics for quite some time. Has that ever happened before? You ever seen anything like this before?
Ryan, I've been in municipal politics now for over 18 years. I have never, ever experienced anything like that. It was a very sad day in the history of Leduc Council meetings.
So what do you think is, we're talking to civic leaders, we're talking to community leaders in many different communities. We're seeing this happen. I'm going to play video after I talk to you from the Los Angeles School Board president. They're seeing protests outside their schools down in California. The story's not limited to Alberta, but there seems to be an uptick in this type of protest. Are you seeing the same thing? And if so, what do you think is driving that?
Ryan, I have no idea. I think, coming out of COVID, that there's a lot of anger that was created during COVID. And I think we're seeing that now. I think politics in the States, what we've seen in the States, there's so much hate talk. It's now on social media, it's okay to go and just trash people. And, so it's a sad time in our society. And, I hope that by airing things like this and showing things like this, that maybe we'll start to get the people, the silent majority that actually don't support hate speech like this, that they will speak up and start to take a stand.
So, Mayor, when you shut down that meeting, my understanding is that you left council chambers along with at least one other councillor. What was that experience like? What did you hear once you left and the door closed behind you? But I suspect that it didn't wrap up quietly.
No, absolutely not. So what happened is I called for a recess. I left, because again, I didn't want to say anything or do anything that would just inflame the situation. So I called a recess. That stopped the recording. I left the chambers for probably about 5 minutes. I could not believe all the yelling and screaming that was going on. I give our city manager great credit. What he did is he helped try and get some of the people out of the chamber. What happened is I came back into the council chambers and I asked council to make a motion to go into closed session. We passed it immediately. As soon as we went into closed session, that meant that everybody had to leave the chambers. And again, I give our city manager a lot of credit. He basically helped people get out of the chambers. It probably took about 10, 15 minutes. And, and again, lots of yelling, threats. Like I've never seen that at a council meeting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, Mayor. My understanding is that members of the council, perhaps including you, have faced threats. Are we talking written threats, verbal threats? Can you tell us about these?
These are verbal threats. It's sad. Like, when I first got on council, I loved public commentary because it gave people a chance to come in and meet and talk to us about things that, we weren't necessarily aware of. What's happened, though, is over the last year, because we probably have the least amount of rules for public commentary of any council in Alberta. And so basically, we don't restrict anything. And what's happened is our public commentary has evolved into just this ugly beration of council and staff. Our city manager actually removes our staff from the chamber to protect them. It's unfortunate. Like I said, I would love to, and my door is always open. I will talk with anybody, but when people start coming in and berating council and staff, it's gone too far.
So is this going to change the way that you politic? I mean, is this going to change the way that things work in Leduc?
I hope not. I truly believe that that we're going to move past this, and and again, I think events like this on your show, where we're making this kind of public displays known to everybody, I think that we will see. I truly do believe that the majority of people are disgusted when they see things like this, and I really appreciate seeing the Oilers and Connor McDavid the other night, where he says the Edmonton Oilers are still, it's a game for everybody. And, the city of Leduc on our buses, it's a seat for everyone. And, I hope that that's the message that comes out of this.
Mayor, when you see stuff like that go down, when you witness it at the council meeting Monday night, when you're obviously aware that RCMP are investigating vandalism of that Pride crosswalk, what does that do to your resolve to observe Pride in the city of Leduc?
You know what? It just proves to me that we have to do more. It's, for the life of me, I don't understand how people are so threatened by having a rainbow flag or a rainbow crosswalk or a bus that has been wrapped with a great message. I don't know why that threatens people. When my grandkids take a look at the Pride flag, they say, "Oh, look at all the pretty colors." We're not promoting anything. All we're promoting is that everybody should be treated without discrimination, and we should be an inclusive society.
Well said, Mayor. Really appreciate your availability. I know you shuffled a few things around this morning to talk to us, and we're grateful for it. That's Leduc Mayor Bob Young.
Thanks, Ryan. Always make time for you.
You got it, buddy. I sure appreciate that. That is one of the good guys.
Great guy.
In politics. In just a second, we're going to welcome in Jeff Nash, founder of Rinks Around the League. He's got a great take on the hockey angle on this, and we're also going to play you a video, a portion of really a powerful moment from the president of the Los Angeles School Board, Jackie Goldberg, who pushed back on protests outside of elementary schools in the state of California. That's coming up in just a second. Here on Real Talk, these conversations happen because we have sponsors like Kubi Energy that believe in the value of real talk. It was great to see them out supporting our Real Talk Golf Classic last Thursday. Boy, are we ever grateful for that. Now, there's good news, more good news for those of you that call Edmonton or the Edmonton region home. The city of Edmonton in particular is helping its residents install solar power systems on their homes to produce renewable energy by offering 40 cents per watt toward the cost of the system. So that covers like 15% of the price tag on going solar. Rebate stacking, they call it. That's also allowed within Canada's Greener Homes Grant program. I've been telling you about that one. That's that $40,000 interest-free loan that's available, up to a max of 100% of the total investment made by the homeowner. Here's the deal. If you're like me and numbers make your head spin, if I was you, I would just get in touch with the Kubi team and they can lay out for you how all this works. They can even make the grant application for you to save you the time and the headache. You can find them online at kubienergy.ca or give them a call at 780-340-5829. Big shout out to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Apex Automation wants the professional engineers that are listening to this show, and by the way, that includes those of you, congratulations, that are wrapping up your studies at engineering schools, in particular at UBC, U of A, University of Calgary. Kubi is growing rapidly, expanding their team. The newest field office just opened in Houston, Texas. They're in Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, across the country, and they're looking for talented team members to join them as they continue to lead the way with automation across the country. If a career working with autonomous vehicles and machinery, advanced process controls, robotics appeals to you, you're going to want to check out apexautomation.ca today. This is a company that puts its people ahead of its profits, and it shows in how they run their business. That's Apex Automation, a proud sponsor of Real Talk. We also wanted to give a big heads up for those of you that are going to be celebrating Canada Day over the weekend. You want to bring something, whether you're hosting the party or you're going to somebody else's, something that'll stop the show, something that will wow everybody in attendance. We found it for you, and we found them at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Look no further. It is the classic DQ Canada Day cake. Look at this thing. This is absolutely fantastic. The DQ Canada Day cake lets you kick up your July 1st festivities up a notch with a Canada cake, complete with customizable designs, red and white. Check this out on my screen. This is absolute. My mouth is watering just looking at it. This is the tastiest way to celebrate Canada. The classic DQ dessert adds way more fun to an already awesome day, and you can find them, order them custom, or pick one up off the shelf at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, or Baseline Road. Jeff Nash coming up in just a second. We call him Nasher when we're talking hockey. But first, I wanted to jump down to California for a second. Stories like this are not limited to Canada. They're certainly not limited to the province of Alberta. California has seen significant protests, loud protests over books and initiatives, including Pride at elementary and junior high schools. And, well, it certainly caught the attention of the president of the Los Angeles School Board, Jackie Goldberg, who, from her elevated position, literally and metaphorically, had strong words for the state of California. Here she is.
Now, a lot of people out there I talk to outside Saticoy say, oh, I have a gay cousin, I have a gay nephew, I can't be homophobic. BS. BS. You can be homophobic and have a gay friend, a gay neighbor, a gay son, a gay anything. Talk to all the gay kids that get thrown out of their houses and onto the streets by parents who say, I won't have you in my house any longer. And tell me that having a gay relative means that you're not homophobic. But here's what really scares me. When you have 2 or 3 days of this kind of chaos, of people screaming at the top of their lungs outside a school that read a book with one sentence in it that said, yeah, guess what? Families can include 2 moms and 2 dads. By the way, at the little discussion at the school after that, as soon as the book was over, one of the little girls sitting at my knees said, I have 2 mommies. But a little boy on my other side said, I have 5 grandmas. The idea that there are different kinds of families. The people screaming out at the streets, they didn't get a chance to find out about that because they made a decision based on hearsay. They made a decision based on agitators, not from their community, but from outside their community who saw an opportunity to take advantage of the real fears of people. I want to be very, very, very clear. Nobody has to accept me. I'm not looking for your acceptance. But you better treat me the same way you treat everybody else. That's how we live in this country.
Powerful stuff from the president of the LA School Board, Jackie Goldberg. Jeff Nash joins us in studio. He's the founder of Rinks Around the League. He's worked in the National Hockey League for a long time, and he's been a really great friend of this show, and I want to welcome you here. Thank you for joining us here. You've got just a big, I don't even know how to describe the look on your face, but you've heard Mayor Young. You just heard President Goldberg there. How are you wrapping your mind around this stuff?
I mean, I'm glad to hear people articulate that so well. Like, it's, do I need to say anything more? These people articulated their point and made their point so well. Yeah, it's awesome to hear people speak so passionately about that.
You've built quite a following on your Instagram and your YouTube channel, and you celebrate like the beauty of the game, of the frozen game, and people's backyard rinks and ODRs, we call them, the outdoor rinks and things like that. You're a passionate hockey fan. You and I last spoke right around the Hockey Canada scandal when it was first breaking, and you and I were discussing, just as hockey dads, how we felt about it and how we felt about our kids playing hockey. And I know that you've always been able to, and actually quite eager to think about and to talk about the health of the game outside of the X's and O's, outside of the offside rule or the two-line pass rule. You care more about the culture of the game, and you released a post just a few days ago after National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman said they're not going to be doing themed jerseys anymore.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on the sport is to kind of grow it. I have kids that my youngest son plays hockey now, and my role as a dad and someone who's worked in the game and lived hockey my whole life, it's about making the game accessible to everyone, whether it's culturally or financially, or as much as I can help in that area. My whole kind of point with all this is to try to make it comfortable for everyone, because I love the sport. We all do. Like, we all have roots in the game in terms of the sport or production. And there's no real place to alienate anyone. Like, it's supposed to be a sport. It's supposed to be fun, it's competitive, but not shutting everybody out or alienating everybody, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about competitive, and if you want Canada to remain competitive, or any jurisdiction to remain competitive, one of the obvious starting points is to get more people involved in the sport, have a bigger and deeper talent pool. What do you make of this announcement from the NHL? I've seen some different opinions. Some people say that this is a coward. This is cowardice on display from the NHL. They had some prominent players led by Ivan Provorov, the Flyers. He was kind of the first one to go public, saying he wasn't comfortable based on his religious beliefs, Russian Orthodox beliefs, wasn't comfortable wearing the Pride jersey. The Stahl brothers, James Reimer and others followed. I've seen other people saying the NHL should be about sport. They're putting their athletes in a tough spot anyway. You shouldn't introduce politics, some people have said. I don't think Pride is political, but I guess maybe sometimes it is. Where do you land on this?
Yeah, so the people who chose not to wear it, they have their reasons, or what they describe as the reasons. And with not only with Pride Night, but Military Night, Hockey Fights Cancer Night, all that kind of stuff. When Connor McDavid wears a military night, it doesn't mean he's a soldier. He's representing and making that connection with the military community. If Darnell Nurse wears Hockey Fights Cancer, it doesn't mean he has cancer. It's a tie-in with the community. Same thing with Pride. When the Oilers wear the Pride jersey, it's connecting with that fan base. It's connecting with that group of people, and it's people who are in the community. It's a huge emotional tie-in with the team. It's a huge tie-in to connecting with the fan base. And the decision by Bettman, I mean, let's face it, like, a couple of people overall in the whole entire National Hockey League, a couple of people had issues with it. And the NHL's reaction to it was like, no, we'll pull the plug on everything, which, has repercussions on many levels financially. The NHL teams sell these jerseys. It's an easy sell with, Connor signs his military jersey and auctions it off. I'd guess $5-10 grand easily.
I would
right?
say easily 10.
Yeah. And when you sell a whole team of jerseys like that, it's kind of a major fundraiser. So it has a lot of repercussions, not only with representation, but also a lot of other things down the line.
Yeah. Johnny and I were talking about this, and I did share it on the show at our Real Talk Golf Classic on Thursday. Here's the thing. A few Real Talk sponsors came together on this. They didn't know that they were going to come together on this, but Kelly Tackaberry, who's one of the owners of Complete Care Restoration, they built this studio here, right? He donates an autographed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins Hockey Fights Cancer sweater, right? The purple and pink one, of course,
Yep.
And anyway, so they set it up for a prize. I think it was for a putting contest, right? So then Mark Cardinal of the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton, so he wins it. And Cards gets up there to accept this jersey. It's beautiful. It has the hologram sticker verifying its authenticity and all that kind of stuff. Real collector's item. Mm-hmm. Don't have to tell you, is the first season Nuge hit 100 points.
Yep.
There's a lot of reasons why this is a special sweater.
Yep.
And the value going up, unfortunately, because the league says they're not going to do these anymore. So now these are limited edition jerseys.
Yeah.
And so Cards comes up there and he says, you know what I'd like to do? He goes, I got a lot of jerseys. I'd like to donate this back. He says to me, would you do a live auction on the fly? So I did. And it goes back and forth between several collectors, and it winds up in the lap of California Closets president Cameron Johnson, who paid $3,500.
Wow.
Didn't know 2 minutes ahead of time he was going to do it. $3,500 for that sweater. That's one example of thousands we could give you on the value of this. Now, this is not just, to state the obvious, but I want to remind people, this is not just the National Hockey League saying we're not doing Pride anymore, right? To reiterate what the point you've made, they're not going to do military appreciation anymore. Now, maybe the Oilers will. The Flames might. The Canucks might. The Washington Capitals might. But the National Hockey League collectively will not be participating in initiatives like cancer awareness. They will not be supporting breast cancer. You think of the NFL or the NBA, you think they would ever make a move like Bettman did?
I mean, and that I made a point the other day that the NHL is kind of hurting in some ways. Like their viewership is down. Like I read an article that the playoffs had a 22% decline in viewership and stuff. The NHL is wrestling with like their image, right? They had a lot of the controversies with the Blackhawks come out. This decision kind of seemingly on a whim. I don't know who was all involved in making that decision, but the NHL has some work to do with their image, especially with competing on the American market. You've got NFL, NBA, MLB. I would argue college sports, like an NHL. Like NHL, we love NHL. It's huge in Canada, but they're really trying to tap into that American market, and they're wrestling with the Coyotes playing in a 5,000 seat arena because they can't get a deal done in Arizona. So there's a lot of many layers that the NHL is fighting right now to appeal to fan bases. And when Bettman made this decision, I looked at him like, why on earth would they do that? Like when I read the tweet, I was like, what are they doing? Like, why would they alienate or piss off Pride people? Because let's face it, we're talking about Pride Night here. Or
it's
Pride
what it's
jersey.
about. No
we're
one
not talking about
complained
military night. We're
no
not talking
one
about
complained
cancer. It's about the Pride jersey. And when they made that decision, I'm like, what are they doing? Like one of the few things the NHL is really progressive. On the last episode of the show that I was on, I was talking about how the NHL is very reactionary when it comes to hockey's for everyone, Black History, like all those kinds of things. And the warm-up jerseys is actually one of the progressive things that they've done in a little while. Like it's not only Pride jersey, but they have Chinese Lunar New Year. They have Aboriginal themed jerseys, and it's massively important to those. Like I've heard that rhetoric from a bunch of people, like just leave it out of sports, and I can understand that, but I think people underestimate the power that sports has to draw attention and make those ties to those communities. And if you're a member of those communities, if you're an Aboriginal person, you look at the Oilers Turtle Island jersey, 100%, like they're like, wow, the Oilers, like they represent me. And they're still going to sell the jerseys in the store, which is let's say Hockey Fights Cancer. If you lost a loved one with cancer, you're probably still going to buy that jersey, put your loved one on the back, and wear it with pride. But it's a direct link to that community, and when people see that, it makes an impact. Like visual representation matters, and just talk to anyone in those communities. Like the Chinese community in Vancouver, I just saw the Canucks Lunar New Year jersey go up. The Chinese community in Vancouver are probably like that. That's a beautiful jersey, and like that, the Canucks have me. Like they represent me. So that it's hugely important.
Well, and there could be like a young Chinese Canadian boy or girl that all of a sudden can picture themselves playing hockey at a high level. Right? I mean, you see I don't have to give examples of representation, but there are multiple storylines with a player like Zach Whitecloud, for example, on the Las Vegas Golden Knights to hoist the Stanley Cup. You see an Indigenous player hoisting the cup. That's an inspiration for a lot of people. We talked about Nazem Kadri hoisting the cup with the Colorado Avalanche. What did people talk about? They talked about despite the fact that he's a remarkable two-way player and a real pest and the guy you hate until he's on your team, then you love him. There's a lot to talk about with Kadri. But the first Muslim player to ever hoist the Stanley Cup, that it can inspire millions of kids around the world. I just find, even for a sport like hockey, where we celebrate, a guy that gets 70 stitches to the face and comes back in the same game, right? Charles Barkley, one of my favorite commentators of all time, he goes, an NBA player would retire if he got cut like that. The hockey is known for being courageous and gutsy, and to me, it just feels like the league folded like a cheap tent when players that we could count on one hand protested something. Let's be like, how many players in the league, Jeff? About 800 players? Yeah. Something like that?
Yep.
There's a lot of players. 5 or 6 of them didn't like it. All of a sudden, the league says we're not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, that argument of keep stuff out of sports. It's just, when I go to a game, I just want to watch the game. I don't want to think about anything else. But again, the vehicle of the power of sports helping and spreading the message. I mean, that what happened at Leduc meeting, like that's the whole purpose of having the pride jersey, is to help educate and draw attention to that. And like I said off the top, is I think there's people who are against it have this idea that wearing something like that is inappropriate or changes somebody, but it's not that they 100% maybe morally or personally support that, but it's they wear it to show that specific demographic, like, hey, you're welcome here, you're welcome to play here. So yeah, it's and I saw another argument of someone saying, well, they only wear it for 15 minutes anyway, so why is it a big deal? And I counter that point with, like, exactly, so it's only for 15 minutes.
Yeah,
they wear it for warm-ups. The building is a quarter full and they wear it, but like, if you have the argument of like, well, who cares? Like, exactly. Like, it's a really easy way to tap into that market or that demographic, and it's a really good symbol of what the Oilers or NHL teams stands for. When Connor McDavid puts on that warm-up jersey, he's not he's not a soldier, or he's not whatever. He's an Oiler, and whatever else is around that Oilers logo is. And people may not remember that the lavender jerseys and the camo jerseys are fairly new to Oilers. Like, when I started in 2013, they didn't wear them during warm-up. So it's a relatively new thing, and it's a relatively easy thing for them to pull off, to pull off to show their position on proactive things. And it's so rare in the hockey.
Man. It goes such a long way.
Absolutely.
And I think that, like, you just made this point with McDavid, and you could say that about really any professional athlete or celebrity for that matter. The idea of strength in numbers, right, or strength in prominence is, someone may, these people outside schools, protesting outside schools and yelling and screaming, and actually making kids kind of nervous over something like a storybook that says, like, a family can have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, which, newsflash, that's true. Yeah. And a lot of these people probably aren't up to speed on the facts. I mean, it's almost, I'm quite embarrassed for this lady, Laurel, at the Leduc Council meeting, just for her level of misunderstanding on what things stand for, and I'm not sure where she's getting her information. I have my suspicions, and we know that people are down rabbit holes, and we know that conspiracy theories and misinformation are a problem more now than ever before. We talk about it a lot on the show. It's one thing to have that sort of bully mentality where you come in loud in front of schools and make a lot of noise with your barrel chest puffed out, and it's another thing to intimidate people and to squeal your tires through the Pride crosswalk and mess it up. But when all of a sudden, somebody like the greatest hockey player in the world, the $20 million man, including endorsements, Connor McDavid, is wearing that jersey or is supporting a cause, all of a sudden these loud voices get a little more quiet. They get a little less courageous in their convictions. It goes a long way to support people that have historically been marginalized and have been bullied and have been abused and disrespected. And that's one of the reasons why I just really think that the National Hockey League has taken an embarrassing position on this one.
And it's such a, in my opinion, it's such a slam dunk thing. Like, it's so easy for players of the teams and the organizations to wear that. You know, the organization and the staff and within those organizations celebrate pride with their own activities. I mean, the players should be no different. I mean, I guess the argument could be said that, you know, it's going against their individual perspective or moral or religious reasons or whatever. But, you know, my son plays hockey, and he looks at, you know, like you said, the greatest player in the world, whether it's Connor or Sydney or whatever. And, you know, they're like, okay, they've kind of normalized, you know, seeing that stuff. And it's important, you know, if my son, you know, grows up and you know, is a member of the Pride community when he grows up or whatever, he at least grew up knowing that, you know, the greatest player in the world supports me. And, you know, some of the greatest speeches regarding that topic come from guys who are kind of like those tough guys, like Keith Tkachuk. Like this season when that controversy came up with the players not wearing it, you know, he made a really, really good speech that you're welcome in my locker room. And that's so important. Like, some people will downplay that, but it's so important. And, you know, I'm just sitting here as a hockey guy. I'm not, you know, I support all kind of initiatives, whether it's Pride or Lunar New Year or whatever. Like, I hope I'm representing the Pride community well by kind of lending my voice to say that, you know, the NHL had a really easy decision, and for whatever reason they like you said, they just folded. And again, I just kind of roll my eyes at the one of the few things that the NHL is really progressive in. They chose to take the regressive action and be like, no, you know what, we had a couple players and we had whatever GMs come to us and say, oh, you know, we're not going to do it, it's too much of a distraction. Which, by the way, like, they had to answer questions for maybe a day or two. Like, the story breathed for a little while, but then it, you know, all of a sudden Bettman came out and said, we're not doing it anymore. But like, oh, really? Like, I didn't even know that was on the radar, that they were going to cancel all of it. Like, you know, it did have oxygen for a little while, but, you know, coaches and players, they answer tough questions all the time. And, you know, it's just part of their job too, right? So
I think it's embarrassing, and I love the hockey metaphor of turtling. The NHL turtled on this one. You mentioned Matthew Tkachuk. He knows a thing or two about turtling.
I think the worst part here is, too, we know this is about pride. Like, we're talking about all these other jerseys, South Asian, the Turtle Island. We're talking about cancer, the military. No one has a problem with those. So we know this is directly linked to homophobia. If someone said they weren't going to wear a South Asian jersey or we're going to celebrate Indigenous culture on one of those nights, there would be uproar. So this is targeting one specific group of people. It's just horrible.
And I had a really brief live video that I published, and the proof is in the pudding when we talk about drawing attention to these things. There's some group chat comments in my comment section of some pretty naive viewers that, you know, they were like, well, you know, Pride is a religion and we shouldn't be honoring religious things at hockey games. And I'm like, dude, like, you need some education, because it's not a religion. But that's exactly why we need these things, because for whatever reason, people really have a bone to pick about Pride Night, and they have these notions in their head, and you've got to use these opportunities to really tell them, like, look, whatever you're thinking right now, let me help you, educate you, because it's not what you're thinking what it is.
Society is moving, whether people like it or not. Yeah. And, you know, you talk to a 7 or 8 or a 9-year-old right now, and typically they have a more fulsome understanding of how the world works than a lot of people that are sort of stuck at a certain point in time and doing their best to resist movement toward equality and equitable representation. So you can let us know what you think about this. Talk at RyanJesperson.com. If you think Nasher and Johnny and I are way off on this, you let us know. If you think we've hit the nail on the head, if this is something that resonates with you personally, we would love to hear from you. And, of course, we'll integrate emails and tweets, even comments on our YouTube episodes from viewers in shows to come. Check out my screen here. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe to Jeff's channel, Rinks Around the League. Find out what he's all about, and check out, I mean, some of the stuff he does is just so cool.
Check out the Ghostbusters. My kids are in that one. We did a glow-in-the-dark ice-themed rink with the Ghostbusters. We had the Alberta Ghostbusters come out, and we shot a little video. It's check that out. It was a fun one to put together.
So cool. That's Jeff Nash, founder of Rinks Around the League. Thanks, man. Appreciate you showing up for this. In just a second, we're going to talk to Alberta's Assistant Auditor General about orphan wells. This is follow-up to a story that we've been on for, well, at least a couple of years now. And, of course, a lot of advocates, I don't have to tell you, have been calling out Alberta's energy regulator on this. Albertans are wondering who's going to pay for all of these farmer rigs, essentially, these wells that have been drilled. They're just left all over the place, untended, leaking methane. I mean, it's a real issue. That in just a second. But first, why don't we remind ourselves what we're talking about protecting here? Nature. Johnny, I'm going to actually take us out to Jasper right now. You know, every single Wednesday, right? This is a tradition here on the show. If we can't be out in Jasper in person, we want to take you there mentally and remind you about what's coming up out there. This is a great reason, if you haven't made plans already for the Canada Day long weekend, to head out to Jasper National Park. Presented by Tourism Jasper, this is our weekly tradition called MyJasper Memories. And this week, we're focusing on one of Jasper's most prominent landmarks, Mount Edith Cavell. If you've been out there, you know this beautiful peak. It defines a big part of that beautiful view. And there's a bit of news this week. The winding 14-kilometer long road that ascends from Highway 93A, the Icefields Parkway, to the base of Mount Edith Cavell is now open for the season. It closes through the winter months, and it's open again. Mount Edith Cavell is easily one of Jasper's most famous mountains, with its signature diagonal rock patterns, its renowned alpine wildflower trails, and fascinating history. It's easy to see why. You can get to the parking lot easily, and from there you can walk a short paved pathway that leads to jaw-dropping views of the Angel Glacier, the mint green lake below. It's stunningly beautiful, and the iconic sparkling peak above. If you're feeling extra adventurous, hikers can opt for a longer non-paved pathway up into an alpine meadow with beautiful panoramic views. Want to let you know that dogs are not permitted on the upper part of the trail. You know, there is wildlife up there, right? You can elevate your experience as well by going with one of Jasper's great local guides. I highly recommend it. The high-altitude exposed meadow that characterizes these upper trails at Mount Edith Cavell are some of the best spots in the national park to see alpine wildflowers, and we're getting right into that season where they are just exploding on the landscape. Absolutely spectacular, but they are fleeting. Now, the absolute best time in the season to see them range from mid-July to mid-August, but of course that depends on the year. You know who Edith Cavell was? She was a heroic nurse who saved hundreds of lives during the First World War. And the mountain named in her honor is the highest mountain visible from the Jasper town site. It rises to almost 3,400 meters elevation, and it's easily the most prominent peak located entirely within Alberta. You know, Mount Robson kind of bumps over there, right? It's also one of the best places to see leftover glacial features like the moraines and glacial erratics. There's a lot of reasons to check out Mount Edith Cavell. Again, that road, that 14-kilometer road up to the pathway is now open off Highway 93A. You can go to jasper.travel if you want to learn more. And of course, if you get some amazing photos or video of those alpine wildflowers, we'd love to see them. When you post them on Instagram or on Twitter, use the hashtags MyJasper and RealTalkRJ, and you could see your work, your masterpiece, featured on a future episode of MyJasper Memories, presented on Real Talk by Tourism Jasper. Let's get down to business. Alberta's Auditor General releasing a report a short time ago, back in March, entitled Liability Management of Non-Oil Sands Oil and Gas Infrastructure. This was essentially an audit of the systems that the AER, that's the Alberta Energy Regulator, refers to as its so-called liability management system. We're talking about accountability here. And you've heard a lot about orphan wells and the billions of dollars of liabilities that exist right now. These are wells that have essentially been abandoned, leaving landowners and Albertans in the lurch. We want to get into this, find out what the report says and ultimately what it means. Are we moving in the right direction? I know a lot of you have a very simple and pointed question that you ask us. Can we trust Alberta's energy regulator? Eric Leonty is the Assistant Auditor General of Alberta. He's been kind enough to join us this morning on the show. It's nice to see you, and thanks for making time for us, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, Eric, I'm hoping we can get into the report and some of the findings, but maybe you can also help us understand the role that the Auditor General's office plays in this. How does something like this get flagged? What prompts the investigation? And then how is it carried out?
So maybe just background of our office. I mean, we are an independent, nonpartisan office. Objectivity, credibility, being a trusted source of credible information, that's central to our office, and we instill that in all our staff, and comes through our work. We're the legislated auditor for every provincial ministry and department, as well as most provincial agencies, boards, and commissions, including the Alberta Energy Regulator. And overall, we have two types of audits that we do. We have the annual financial statement audit work that we do for the government of Alberta and all the various agencies, boards, and commissions. And then we also have an important line of work called performance auditing, where we look at programs, processes, systems that deliver essential services and regulatory systems, and to see whether those are operating effectively and achieving outcomes. And that's where this work that we'll be talking about around liability management for non-oil sands oil and gas sites comes into play. And the performance audit work that we do, it's selected based on risk. We obviously have a connection with the various departments and the agencies, boards, and commissions through our work. And, through that, we, identify potential areas for audit. We receive a lot of sometimes concerns and questions from the public. We take that into account, and, just generally environmental scan of the things that are going on within the province. We ultimately report and serve the Legislative Assembly, so that's the entire Assembly. And by extension, we see that as serving all Albertans and the general public. And, we hope that they engage with our work. And our goal is to have our work acted upon. So, MLAs, stakeholders, and the public engaging with our work are a big part of that as well, that whatever recommendations we make for improvement, that those are acted upon.
What role does public pressure play in triggering an investigation from the Auditor General?
Well, as I mentioned, we certainly take into account when we receive, like I said, we receive concerns or questions or comments, insights into various government program services and processes. And, certainly this is an area that we did have received a lot historically, and take that into account when deciding what we're going to do and when. There's other factors we take into account as far as timing, because there can be substantial changes taking place. That actually did happen in this circumstance, and that helps inform when's the best time for us to do the work.
What do you mean by that?
So, for instance, if there's a significant new programs or processes, or those are going to undergo change, we want our audits to add the maximum value. So we don't want to audit an area that's going to be irrelevant or not as important in the future, or something that's going to change. But we also want to time it where we have the opportunity to recommend improvements when there's that opportunity to make those changes, and will help things going forward. So that does play a role into it.
How relevant is the orphan well situation in Alberta right now?
Extremely relevant. It's a long-standing issue. I think since 2010, it's a 5% growth rate in inactive sites. And it poses potentially a number of risks, financial risks, public safety, health risks, environmental, and reputational. And I think those are, for those who are following along, understood that those exist, but whether and to what degree they manifest themselves, depends on good processes by the regulator and industry fulfilling their responsibilities. So, and I think it's an issue that's just grown in importance and risk, and obviously a key factor in why we chose to do a fairly broad, in-depth audit in this area.
Okay, so we're going to punch. People can check out the official website for the Auditor General of Alberta. It'll be in the show notes for the podcast and on YouTube, and for our live tuning audience, we'll punch it into the chat. But the Auditor General, in this report released in March, makes 9 recommendations to the Alberta Energy Regulator to improve processes, and they get into it. We don't want to get into the weeds too much, Eric, here, but but what are some of the significant recommendations? What do you think the general public would be most interested to know about what the AG says needs to happen with the AER, with the Energy Regulator?
Yeah, maybe just quickly to set the stage for that. One of the things we saw in the audit very quickly is AER themselves had, they'd done a robust risk analysis to look at, the history and what were sort of the key issues that were facing the province and the regulator. And the three most important ones that came from that were the timeliness of the work that's being done, unfunded liabilities, particularly around legacy sites. So those are sites where there isn't a backstop like the orphan fund, as well as inadequate security collection. And so that was in a way sort of a starting point for us. And in looking at that, we did see that there still are some additional gaps that haven't been resolved by the new framework that the AR was implementing to deal with some of those key issues. In particular, the legacy site issue that even though it's there's ongoing deliberation discussions about that, there isn't a decision or resolution on how those will be dealt with without that industry backstop. The issue of pipeline liabilities also wasn't dealt with through that framework, and how that impacts liability and security calculations. And then the financial security mechanism itself. It's understood through the framework that will be, reviewed and changed, but there is no change to that yet. So that security mechanism has had a number of issues, and I think once again, those who understand the matter, it's been an issue for a long time, and so that's the system that will continue until there's an update there. So as far as the new framework, that are some of the initial things that we saw. The other areas, one important one includes public accountability. So you'd mentioned trust earlier, and I think that question will probably come up again, but one of the ways in which that can be achieved is really robust, transparent information for the public to see if results are being achieved. So as there's new programs like the inventory reduction program put into place, Albertans are going to want to see, is that reducing the inventory? Is that resulting in timeliness? And what we had found is that reporting isn't where it needs to be right now. One area in particular is the liability figure itself. There's a number of numbers that have been floating around over the last while. We acknowledge those in our report. 60 billion for total active, inactive, approximately 10 to 13 billion inactive sites, and this is non-oil sands. And it's, I think, important for the regulator to explain what those numbers mean and what the risk is behind that. You do have a continuum of risk. You have financial operators that have the financial wherewithal to deal with the inactive sites, and on the other end of the continuum, you have sites where there is no backstop and they just remain inactive and potentially a real problem. So I think those are things that certainly the AER could do. And maybe just quickly in some of the other specific areas we looked at, one important relationship is with the Orphan Well Association and the AER's assessment of information from that. And we did see some improvements during the course of our audit. In 2022, the AER began evaluating the industry levy proposed to OWA to deal with orphan wells. And in the past, we didn't see evidence that there was actually scrutiny of that to the level that's needed. And so there was an increase of 70 to 130 million. And so I think there's improvements on the fly that were taking place as well. And with financial security, as I mentioned before, found that the calculations for that are a problem. And the main objectives to encourage, closure work to take place and to protect the public from financial risk, those objectives were under strain with the current security mechanism, and that's another area we made recommendations. And then maybe just finally around regulatory compliance. So this would be more so the quality of the work that's being done in the important closure areas, including suspension, abandonment, remediation, and reclamation. We found a number of areas for improvement. Those regulatory processes are taking place, but there are some, like I said, areas for improvement and gaps, some compliance activities either that were no longer taking place, reviews of remedial action plans that weren't monitoring timelines, those sorts of things that I think really would also help not just the quantity of the liability, but making sure the quality of the work done on those sites is meets the directives and standards that the regulator has.
For people, we're talking to Eric Leonty, Assistant Auditor General, Province of Alberta. People that are going to get into this report, it's a 46-page report. It's available to the public. Anybody can read it. Page 30 is one that you want to focus your attention on, Eric. You were just addressing that, the Orphan Well Association, the Alberta Energy Regulator, the risks to the polluter pays principle that have increased in recent years. People will see that the government of Alberta has been making interest-free loans available. The most recent one was at $335 million in interest-free loans from the government of Alberta since 2017. The energy regulator says they're not involved in that, in monitoring that, and determining the amounts. But of course, these are public funds that are going toward this. I mean, you pinpoint those liabilities as you say $60 billion. We've heard upwards of $300 billion. I mean, who really knows here? But it's not realistic, is it, to suggest that this is something that's going to be recouped from oil and gas companies? I mean, this is, and I know, Eric, you're in a delicate spot here because you're going to say, well, I can't take a position on this. The Office of the AG is not here to provide opinion commentary, but ultimately the risk here, the biggest risk to the public, aside from the environmental liabilities, is that taxpayers, that citizens will be left on the hook cleaning this up. Through the course of conducting this investigation, did you see anything that would lead you to believe that there would be any other outcome than that?
Well, maybe the best place for me to start is the notion of the polluter pay principle. And I think an important thing to reinforce is ultimately, yes, the AER is responsible for ensuring that directives are being followed and cleanup is taking place as it should. But industry is ultimately the one responsible to and accountable to doing the cleanup work. I mean, that's the requirement of getting a license to produce oil and gas in this province. One of the things we point out in the report is the polluter pay principle being at risk, or at least that the risk of the polluter pay principle being compromised has increased over the years, and that's from a few factors. I mean, one, just the volume of sites that are going into the sort of Orphan Well Association's purview. The legacy sites that have to be dealt with, and just the growing number of inactive sites from active operators. And so just those inherent characteristics increase that risk. The loans that were made to the OWA that are, would be repaid through the levies over time. There's an opportunity cost to those public funds that could be used elsewhere. Yes, the intent obviously is that those are repaid, but that is public money. And so, I think it's important that the systems and the changes that are taking place now mitigate and reduce the risk of the public having to foot the bill for the cleanup work. I do want to reinforce that the 60 billion figure and the 30 billion, the 10 to 13 billion, those numbers, it is important that those are put in the context of what the risk is. So, the total cleanup liability for all active and inactive sites is a large number, just because there is a very large industry and a lot of activity in the province. But it's going down that risk continuum where the greater efforts need to take place. So once operators are in a state of financial distress, it's a little late to ask for security when they no longer have the means to provide it. So it's, as an example, reviewing that security mechanism and deciding, well, maybe it's earlier in the life cycle, other approaches to make sure that cleanup happens early and often. Ideally the risk has topped out, that there's a peak, and then we can see those improvements going forward.
That's kind of a stupid comparison, but like when I rent a Verbo or an Airbnb with my buddies, I pay the damage deposit at the beginning, not after the house is trashed and we've lost all our money at the blackjack table, right? Like we go off the top, and it strikes me as like that's the way to do it, and it's not the way that it's been done, correct?
Well, there's trade-offs. I mean, the security mechanism, as I said, there's two key objectives: to encourage the work to happen and to protect the financial risk. Many jurisdictions, I think, wrestle with, the notion of full security and what that means as far as, the funds used for that and potentially taking away from other activities the operators have to do. So it's something that regulators have to analyze and make a reasonable decision upon to ensure that for one, the cleanup work happens, the environment's protected, human health and safety is protected, but that also there is an opportunity for investment and work to be done in the province, and that balance is what has been sought, ever since important pieces of legislation around the environment and how to deal with this issue have been put into place. And it does go back to reporting back on the results over time and whether that's actually happening or not, and whether there needs to be abrupt course corrections to make sure that, once again, the public isn't put at undue risk.
Eric, anyone can go view this report. Obviously, that's kind of part of the process. That's obviously part of the transparency that we talked about off the top that's so important to people, or should be anyway. Correct me on any of these fronts, okay? These are observations essentially pulled from the Auditor General's report released in May. Reclamation certificates that are being issued by the Energy Regulator are not consistently valid. In my understanding as a layperson, that means that they're kind of being issued contrary to law. Land that is potentially contaminated and has not been properly cleaned up or restored is being returned to landowners right now. Landowner annual compensation, people that have these sites on their land, is being inappropriately terminated, right? The regulator's not carrying out its critical public safety assurance mandate, no system in place to ensure that the routine abandonment of wells is actually happening, and no method in place, like you just talked about, to measure if inactive or decommissioned wells are actually emitting gases like methane. Is anything that I said there inaccurate?
No, I mean, those are certainly facts from the report. I mean, I would emphasize, as far as some of the regulatory compliance processes, I mean, there are, mechanisms in place at the AER. There are certainly gaps, and, we did detailed work to dig into each of these areas. And yeah, there's some areas of concern that need to be resolved. But there are also compliance activities that are taking place. And I think ultimately has to be commensurate with the risk that exists, and making sure that those happen. Maybe just quickly, specifically with the reclamation certificate process, part of that stems, there's an effort for efficiency and automation. Routine reclamation certificates being approved through the system. Yeah, we found areas where those there's a risk, and examples where some get approved that perhaps shouldn't have, or was missing information before they should have been approved, and that all needs to be administratively dealt with before those are issued. Because in particular for landowners, if there's a reclamation certificate issued, we want to have confidence that all the supporting information and everything that needed to be done has been done. And maybe one other added point related to the list you provided is, I mean, some of AER's own work looking at post-reclamation certificate, a relatively high percentage of sites where there's, they've found problems with it. And so that has, the risk of eroding some confidence in that process.
Yeah,
so,
major credibility problem.
Yeah, and it's good that they're reviewing that and looking at that, but the expectation is that and it fed into one of our recommendations that there's process improvements that help with that going forward. It's a broad and complex problem, and there's a number of important regulatory systems in place to manage it, and there's a number that do need improvement. Yeah,
Eric, I want to thank you for this. I mean, essentially, it is a broad and complex problem, but it also boils down to something very simple, and that is that it appears to be that Albertans are getting a raw deal from Alberta's biggest industry, and that, in my assessment of this, has been operating in bad faith. And I know that you're not going to go on the record and say that, so let me ask you this. What power does the AG, the Auditor General's office, have to compel reform of the energy regulator? I mean, in plain language, does this come down to citizens? I mean, are we talking about placards and protests? Are we talking about writing letters to MLAs and ministers? Because right now, I mean, it seems to me like there's really, I mean, this represents a form of accountability, to be sure, an AG report. But what role can the AG play in ensuring that this report actually has some teeth?
Yeah, well, maybe a couple things. So, I mean, our role and our mandate, we can't compel the organizations we audit to make the changes. That being said, I mean, we do make recommendations, and one important function in our office is that we conduct follow-up work. We request and should be receiving shortly, in this case, an implementation plan on how they're going to deal with the recommendations we've made, and ultimately we follow up our recommendations until they're implemented. So that's an important function as far as the accountability. But to your point of compelling or accountability. And I mentioned, we work for and serve the Assembly, and as I said, by extension, all Albertans. So yes, we hope that the readers, the users of our report, play a role in helping that those encouraging AR to implement those recommendations. I will say the AR had accepted all the recommendations. We had full cooperation throughout the course of our audit. So that's very important and something that we gauge as well. So it's a variety of parties play a role, and for us, we hope that people take an active interest in the results and play a role in encouraging those improvements.
Eric Leonty is the Assistant Auditor General of Alberta, and we appreciate your availability to take these questions, Eric. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. Real Talkers, you can check out the report yourself at oag.ab.ca. You just click on reports. It's easy to find. That's oag.ab.ca, and we'll have that link in the show notes. A bit of a gut punch, I know, a reality check, but at least you narrow down your focus here on some of the real issues, and it means something. When something goes through the Auditor General, that's not hearsay. That's not like, John in Leduc County says this about his property. This is something that certainly has the power to create some momentum and an impetus for change. We're going to stick on this story. Obviously, this is a story that matters across the country, and we'd love your feedback as well, either on or off the record. You know where to find us. You can check out the Connect link on our website at ryanjesperson.com. Wanted to take a second to recognize Real Talk sponsors, and that includes our friends at Friesen Brothers. Now, this is, of course, a big weekend for a lot of you, the long weekend, and you're going to be celebrating Canada Day, potentially with a barbecue. June is pork month at Friesen Brothers, and that means there's a whole lot of options for you. Exclusively fresh Alberta pork that is expertly cut in-store by Friesen Brothers skilled butchers. Now, to honor and appreciate Alberta pork and its dedicated producers, Friesen Brothers supports the promotional activities by Alberta Pork by naming June Pork Month. You can check out more at friesen.com/barbecue season. And if you are prepping to host a Canada Day celebration, you'll find party essentials, barbecue options, family dinner ideas at 16 different Friesen Brothers locations across the province. They've even got special Canada Day flower hanging baskets. They've got bouquets of BC-grown flowers, absolutely beautiful. I pick one up every time I'm there. And more Canada Day special offers in the flyer. You can check out the weekly flyer on their website. That's friesen.com, Freson.com. Edmontonians, did you know that Civic Service Union 52 members help to deliver core city services that you rely on? CSU 52 members are making sure that the City of Edmonton works. Their members are the people who arrange your accessible transportation. They answer your emergency calls. They reunite you with your lost pets. They keep your power on. They spark your imagination and much, much more. CSU 52 members are dedicated to ensuring high-demand services are right here around the clock so that our city works for all of us. CSU 52 and Edmonton for everyone. I mentioned Complete Care Restoration earlier in the show, and boy, are we ever proud to partner with them. This studio wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the team at Complete Care Restoration. They do construction and renovation, but this time of year, their number one priority is helping Albertans get back on their feet after fire or flood. That's right. They know it's a gut punch. They know it is a oftentimes worst case scenario to be dealing with, well, Mother Nature, quite frankly. And that's why Complete Care Restoration treats every project as though it's their own home. We've seen them in action. So whether it is recovering from fire or flood, or maybe a nasty surprise when you opened up some drywall for a renovation and found mold or, heck, even asbestos, don't try to handle that on your own. Visit CompleteCareRestoration.ca today. If you're going to be transforming your outdoor space, there is nobody in the business that does it better than Eden Landscaping. I've been telling you about our own family's journey. They're going to be ripping up our sod and our old bricks starting this weekend, and we're going to be showing you before and after photos as our outdoor space is brought to life. Now, we're a family that's on a budget. We're a family that tries to stretch dollars wherever we can, and it's been amazing to work with Mike and his team as they have navigated balancing our dreams with our reality. And I'm really proud to see how they operate, and I couldn't be more excited to see them work. Now, we're not requiring any retaining walls or excavation, but they do that as well. In fact, they do it all. Outdoor kitchens, water features, intricate stonework. You want one of those 2,000-pound boulders on your front lawn? They can make that happen. There's no problem they've encountered, says Mike, in 20 years that they haven't been able to solve. You can get the conversation started with them today at landscapeedmonton.ca. And I also wanted to remind you that coming up on Friday on this show, Real Talk, we're going to be, presenting another edition of Trash Talk. That's sponsored by our friends at Local Environmental Services. We've already got a couple locked and loaded to do with the Titan sub, Johnny. People have a lot to say about the Titan submersible. But maybe this talk about orphan wells gets you going. Maybe it's the pride controversy in Leduc or somewhere else. Maybe it has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about on the show, and, well, that's what you want to rant about. You can send your trash talk in to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Local Environmental Services is providing everything from fencing and portable toilets, water hauling, landfill services, front load or the big roll-off bins for construction projects, to clients in Alberta and Saskatchewan, offering better service, better prices, and, of course, more support for local causes. That's what comes with doing business with Local Environmental Services. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we want to let you know that we're going to be welcoming 3 of the directors of Alberta municipalities to our physical Real Talk Roundtable. 3 mayors, councillors from Alberta communities are going to talk to us about the issues that matter most to them. What role has this provincial election played in the municipal-provincial relationship? And what are some of the issues flying under the radar that matter to thousands of people that call this province home? We'll go there tomorrow.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh